For the past 4 or 5 years, numerous online communities and publications, such as 8chan or InfoWars, have been either fractured into irrelevance or cast into oblivion entirely by cancel culture. I believe as of 2021 we are seeing an inflection point in that trend. In light of recent troubles, I thought it would be appropriate to talk about a solution that the left seems to have ignored or abandoned. This solution would have solved many of the grievances that they used to have with our freedom of speech. It would have maintained the ability for right-leaning voices to use online platforms without having to build an entire parallel online infrastructure. It has even been implemented by many websites in the past, to varying degrees of success. This solution is called Good Fences Make Good Neighbors. This is a simple concept. Rather than relying on a central authority to decide what posts can or cannot be seen by users, users themselves should be able to decide what content they would like to look at, by filtering or blacklisting the content they don't like. When you filter out a type of content, whether it be through some kind of tagging system or an algorithm, that content should not show up in your feed or search results, ever. Don't want to see liberal content? Filter out liberal content. Don't want to see conservative content? Filter out conservative content. Don't want to see political content at all? Filter out politics. Don't trust the filters? Well, then don't use the filters. This is a solution for everyone. Basically, this solution would be some kind of decentralization of the power of censorship. It would place the power of this censorship with the one who is best situated to employ it. Not the website administration, but the user, because the user knows what he does and doesn't want to see. It would enable the user to set up his own fences at his discretion. And good fences make good neighbors. Now, some of you will object that this will lead to the creation of echo chambers, to which I would counter, what are we experiencing right now? If you go on Twitter and look under a controversial video, say the Kyle Rittenhouse situation, you can find people who simply cannot agree on what happened in that video. No conclusion will ever be reconcilable between those people. The opportunity for persuasion, for an honest argument, is nil. People are, in fact, living in ideological echo chambers that have been constructed out of necessity. It can't get much worse than what we have now. But would it be worse? So I don't know whether this is me talking or 2020 talking, but echo chambers seem to be the natural state of the world. Although echo chambers have been maligned by lots of prominent figures as being a problem created by social media, I'd argue that they're really just a symptom of the way that we've always interacted as humans. Most people want to talk to people who share common interests, cultures, and beliefs. Most relationships are formed on the basis of some commonality, even if that commonality is something as trivial as working at the same job or going to the same restaurant. Most people aren't cut out to be dumped into a room with a random selection of people from varying religious, political, or cultural backgrounds, or even just people of different interests. And I think that even the people who are interested in hearing different voices don't necessarily want to hear them all the time. So I think much of the animosity we see today has been stirred up because people seem to have lost the ability to look past differences and let live. I've experienced this myself. On the occasions that I do go on Twitter and scroll through the massive cesspool of people snarking at each other in outright hostility with no apparent middle ground and no attempt at compromise, I have never left feeling better about it. In fact, I regularly avoid clicking on Twitter links for this reason, and I would encourage those who spend their time being outraged by social media to take a break for a few days and realize that it's not that important. The solution to this would have been a kind of secessionism. We needed fences to give people time to think, not just so they have more time to formulate snappy, snarky clapbacks, but so they have enough to consider whether they should be wasting that time on such things at all. The elephant in the room, thus, is this. Why hasn't the left considered this solution? I think the left of the past might have considered it. I am not so cynical as to believe that the left have always been authoritarians, at least in attitude. The style of government they support, of course, will lead to authoritarianism. But the overt fascistic tendencies of the left, the attitude, I think, is a new phenomenon. Unfortunately, the horse has left the barn. Academia and the mainstream media have spent the last 5 years convincing the left that Donald Trump is literally Orange Hitler, and that anyone who supports him hates Mexicans and is a domestic terrorist. Frankly, if anyone should be indicted for the use of so-called inflammatory rhetoric, it should not be Trump, but rather the media who have capitalized on the spectacle of Trump. The unwillingness of the left to consider decentralization now, of course, reveals that at present, they are not interested in free discourse, nor are they interested in settling conflicts peaceably. Rather, they are now interested in our not being able to speak at all, by any means necessary. Now, in a way, fences are being placed, but in a way that is very disruptive and hardly apolitical. I refer, of course, to the Purge of 2021. These fences are being placed not out of concern for our sanity, but out of animosity. And these fences aren't being placed at a time when they would have been effective. You see, it shouldn't be necessary for the right to build its own servers, payment processors, DDoS protection, CDNs, and what have you. But because of politically influenced censorship, and more broadly, the boiling over of anger and insanity stirred up by the mainstream media, the decision of secession, that is, the decision, so-called, to walk away from big tech, is being made for the right. To end on a positive note, recent events have shown that the prospects for the right are not entirely gloomy. I know it sounds like a lot considering what Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Amazon, and others have done. But the deplatforming of the President of the United States, while heinous in itself, has made millions of conservatives and those of other political leanings very aware of the threat that big tech poses. The sniper fired, but the target is not yet dead. The refusal of the government to investigate election fraud, coupled with its long-standing record of obstructing Trump in frivolous investigations or refusing to follow his orders in pulling troops out of Syria, has further made conservatives skeptical to government solutions. In a way, I am thankful for that. There are no more excuses for supporting companies that hate your guts if you are banned from using their services. So while Twitter stock sinks, Gab has weathered the onslaught, going so far as to establish methods of funding beyond the traditional payment processors and credit cards, and it has attracted millions of new users per day. Alternatives like Parler have seen obstacles like deplatforming from Google, Apple, and Amazon, but unlike previous deplatformings that faded into obscurity, millions are watching. I hope that means that rather than being a death blow, these obstacles will become instructive experiences. What doesn't kill the alternate will hopefully make it stronger.